Within the game Steel Division 2, the way to win is capturing flags from the enemy. In order to do this, you must have your units destroy enemy units that are nearby. And in order to actually destroy units, you have to be able to shoot them. And to shoot units, you have to be able to see them. As such, being able to have high spotting units or recon is a foundational element for any division within Steel Division 2. This video is going to be an in-depth look at all of the recon elements. We're going to talk about the types of recon, the roles they can perform, and how to generally build it almost no matter what division you have. Keep in mind, we're not going to get into specifics, as with over 100 divisions in the game, it's simply not possible. This is a broad overview that hopefully gives you the basic understandings of why people take what they do, and it gives you an understanding to never have a poorly built recon tab. Now, before we get into the specifics of what's in the Recon tab, we need to understand what the Recon tab is kind of doing. Obviously, it's here to spot, and as you'll notice, on every single infantry and vehicle in the Recon tab, there is the Recon trait. Recon is a trait that has two major perks. First off, it is a identifier that allows units to spot enemies from farther distances. Essentially, recon units are the best at seeing stuff. Their ability to see enemy units at long ranges and identify them at long ranges is unparalleled in any of the other tabs or really any other units. However, there is that main drawback, which is that recon troops also exert no control over the front line. This means that even if you had 30 recon tanks, you would not be able to hold control over a flag. This means that recon generally forms a very supportive role, but it is a very important role. Being able to spot enemy units and then pick when you engage them can be a game-changing effect because it just simply allows you to win fights. A good example of this is with 2-kilometer ranged units, such as high-caliber HE shells. A recon unit being able to spot will allow you to lob those extremely destructive shells at stuff 2 kilometers away, making them extremely lethal and able to perform their job. There are two primary types of recon within most divisions. Infantry-based recon that excels by being extremely stealthy and occasionally having some bonus effect or utility, and then armored recon, which is able to not only act as spotting, but be immune to small arms fire, and because of generally having a cannon or machine guns or similar things, they're able to also serve as combat units. There is also unarmored recon, and you will see these in a lot of divisions, but on their own as an individual card, such as this motorcycle with a machine gun, they're not worth it. The reason why is that these units are costing you activation points to take, but you're only getting 6 of them. They don't exactly have amazing stealth compared to the infantry, and their combat range means that enemy infantry is able to shoot at them. And because they're not armored, they're going to very quickly die. They're simply not worth it on their own. Moving on to recon-based infantry, you're going to primarily find two main types taken. Either the cheapest possible option, which are often 2-man recon teams, whose sole purpose is to just be pure spotting, or people are going to take infantry recon that have some sort of combat capability. Now, it's important to note that you need to be a little bit careful of what recon units you're using for combat, as there are a fair number of kind of bait units that you don't want to be utilizing. For example, this 20-man recon squad is just a worse dozer. The few SVTs it has is not going to win any fights, so why pay more for less? The same can even be said for this 11-man recon team. They don't have a loadout that is actually able to do anything to any other unit. Any infantry with an automatic rifle or machine gun will decimate it at range, and at close range, they get curb stomped. Stuff like this is a bait and should never be taken. However, something like the Resvedka is actually good. And the reason for that is that even though its firepower isn't exactly like amazing, especially for 30 points, the big thing here is its utility in the bazooka, giving the unit AT capability and something that the rest of the Soviet roster and many divisions in the Soviets don't have otherwise, which is longer range AT on infantry. Of course, different nations will have different reasons for this, but this AT is a perfect example of what you're looking for in a recon squad that you're looking to have extra use out of. Other things to keep an eye out for: sniper rifles are generally fantastic on recon units. You're not paying much more, and they can effectively bleed and suppress enemy units. You also have units with CQC loadouts like TNT. There's occasionally recon squads with large amounts of SMGs and stuff like shock. Or you can even find some with multiple machine guns, and those are good at actually fighting at range. You'll find a variety of things, but generally, if you would not use this unit as a regular infantry unit, and it doesn't have something unique like a bazooka or something, stay away from it in recon infantry and just go back to your two-man teams. Speaking of those two-man teams, another really important thing is always look at your transport options, because a lot of things can be hidden within that tab. And if you don't know about this, it's very easy to overlook some really useful options. For example, here we have a variety of armored recon vehicles that we can have these two-man teams arrive in. And this is a secret power and a huge pro for the two-man teams, because now this one card of Dozer, instead of just being a couple two-man recon teams, I'm now getting an armored car that for 10 points, I doubled the amount of recon I get per card. I can drop off the two-man recon team for something and then move the BA-20 elsewhere, as it also has the recon trait. That is an extremely powerful perk and a huge element for these smaller recon teams. So always check your transports, because there are even divisions that have things like autocannon cars. The Germans, for example, have the SDKFZ 222, and it's very commonly only a transport option, meaning that you need to bring it in with recon teams. And those are really good cars, and they're armored recon cars with an autocannon, which we'll talk about in a minute, but those are really good, and you get them for free, or, well, bundled together with extra recon. Moving on to the armored cars and other elements, armored cars are very, very common to take within most divisions that have them. The simple matter of a fact is that they're generally very cheap. They have some sort of weapon that can actually damage other armored vehicles. The BA-10 here being a good example, being able to deal with pretty much anything up until medium tanks, and even then it could potentially kill a medium with side shots. But this is a very useful vehicle, because recon cars have a unique benefit where because of their recon trait, they are able to find their own targets. meaning they are able to see enemy infantry without having to get close, and then can just proceed to use their weapons and immunity to small arms fire to just rain destruction upon them. It's actually a very common strategy that you will encounter in the game to have what are called armored car rushes, where people bring a lot of armored cars right out of the gate and then use it to try to essentially destroy your forces before they're all set up. This is also helped by the fact that recon vehicles generally have pretty high speeds and just in general are very good. You always want some yourself, whether that is to bully enemy infantry that don't have any AT around, or to help counter the enemy doing that to your own forces, or even just to have more recon. There's a lot of reasons, and if you have recon cars, at least taking one card is generally the correct option. However, that's not everything, because there are bigger recon vehicles that many divisions have. Notably, something like a T-34 Recon. Now, this is just a medium tank in the Recon tab, and that has its own benefits. Different divisions will have different value to this. Some divisions might lack a lot of medium tanks and utilize these in order to get more medium tanks. Or they may choose to use these because they're able to punch up a bit more against armored cars. For example, if we compare the BA-10 to a T-34, the T-34 is able to completely decimate it. On top of that, as with armored cars, recon tanks are able to spot their own targets and then engage them, which does have benefits. Now, the bigger thing with recon tanks is that they are getting up there in price. You're paying 55 points or more for a vehicle that is unable to affect the front line by itself, and you're generally also losing availability compared to normal cards. For example, this Recon T-34, you get 4 in A compared to 8, and that's without Veterancy. Even 6 with the version 42. So just keep that in mind, that you are trading away generally availability on your recon tanks, and that's actually true of most units, in order to have that additional spotting potential. Regardless, they are quite good, and if you have a big enough recon tab, they can be a good inclusion. The final thing to talk about is Veterancy. Even though the game doesn't tell you this, Veterancy actually does impact recon in a pretty significant way, and that is raising the optics of the unit even more. This can be extremely powerful, as it can turn what are already really good spotters into essentially a Hubble space telescope, able to spot anything and everything that moves within a 2-kilometer radius. Now, you are losing your availability, so there are pros and cons, and some units will benefit more than others, but in general, people tend to opt for one level of Veterancy. Enough that you still retain some amount of the squad overall, but you also have access to that superior spotting. So with all that laid out, let's actually go ahead and build a basic example of a recon tab that has some nice elements in it. This division, Grupa Bezugalogo, I've absolutely butchered that and I apologize, but this force is a pretty decent recon tab. It's not exactly like into the stratosphere like some other recon tabs, but it's not bottom garbage either. So we get some nice options here. As such, we're going to start by taking our 2-man recon teams in A, and we're going to start by putting them in a transport. Now, if we don't have any other option, we could take this unarmored vehicle. Being able to double dip with our 2-man recon teams is really nice. However, this division thankfully has options with armored cars. which are really, really good. We're taking the fastest available one, which is the BA-20, and we're going to take them at Vet 1 because we're going to have a large enough recon tab that we don't need to worry about not having, say, that extra man and car. We're also going to take this card of BA-10s. We'll vet them up to 1, so they have higher fire rate and that superior spotting. We still get a healthy 4 of them. Then we're going to load up our Razvedka. Now, these units have less capabilities, but we're going to take them in just regular old trucks, and that bazooka is really useful, as we don't have really many other handheld rocket launchers in this Soviet division, and we're taking those in A and B. Now, this would be probably a very well fleshed out recon tab. This has a lot of depth to it. You have a lot of spotting. You have some aggression with those armored cars. You could lean even more aggressively by loading in with things like the T-70, able to double up the amount of armored recon you have. Or we could even take some of these T-3476s if we wanted to and we had the activation slots. There's some customizability here, but something like this could be seen as a pretty strong recon tab. It's even possible that we could cut one of our card of Phase A recon, as this can be a bit seen as a bit heavy. Maybe, for example, we don't even take the Dozer, instead opting just for the Razvedka alongside the BA-10s. There's some customizability. See what your division needs, what your options have, but something along the lines of this can be a good baseline template that makes sure you don't run out of recon for pretty much any match you go into. Remember, you have to be able to see stuff to shoot it, so running out of recon can be one of the worst things to happen in a division. And that is going to be the end of this short little guide to Steel Division 2. This was the Recon tab, and I plan on doing a guide for almost every tab within Steel Division, and then making this a playlist that will be able to have a nice compilation of in-depth deck building tips and tricks, getting you to understand and just generally comprehend how to build a deck. Although the information can't be specific, understanding the fundamentals and the reasons why things are chosen help to give you informed choices that makes building decks far less intimidating and more enjoyable. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to not miss out on future ones, including any future Steel Division 2 content. And also leave a comment down below. Did you know everything in this video? Was there something it taught you? Let me know. Otherwise, that's the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching, and have a good day.